We've been taught that anger is something to control, suppress, or get rid of. But what if anger is one of the most intelligent emotions that we have?
In a world that moves too fast to process, Hold That Thought puts words to the thoughts and contradictions you carry, but rarely hear spoken out loud. Every episode, we explore the ideas, relationships, and invisible forces shaping how people move through the world, and why certain experiences change us more deeply than we expect.
This week, we're looking at anger and challenging the assumption that it's inherently bad. We hope that by the end of this episode, you start being able to see what anger really can be: information, a signal that something matters to you, that a boundary isn't being respected, or that a need isn't being met. We'll explore how to recognize that signal, separate it from rage, and use it without letting it control you.
Because if anger isn't your enemy, but rather one of your body's oldest survival tools, learning how to listen to it might change not only how you handle conflict, but how you understand yourself. Hold that thought.
Hi, Becky.
Hi, Titi.
You're looking sun-kissed, I will say.
Thank you.
From where, might I ask?
From, well, not, but kind of Monterey. I went to Monterey and Carmel for the weekend with a couple of friends.
Fun.
4th of July. It was a good time. You went to Seattle.
I went to Seattle, visited 2 friends, had a really wonderful weekend of bakeries, breweries, Bainbridge Island. All those B's just came out of me. We started playing this game. At first, we were calling it The Bridge because it was trying to figure out who was in the middle. If we're 3 friends, who's in the middle of the other 2 in terms of preferences or skills or things like that. But then it ended up becoming this game that we were calling Know Thyself. And one person would ask a category like least flexible. And we would say...
physically flexible or like in plans? Oh, I know the answer. Yeah.
For example, this was just one example. Another example was like most athletic. Then you'd count down 3, 2, 1. You'd have to say 1, 2, or 3, depending on where you thought you were in the trio.
Yeah.
And often we were like situating ourselves perfectly. Even among like people, we were all being very honest. Like most complaining I had. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. I can take it. Then would lead into a discourse about certain things.
It would be you.
Yeah.
And it's a really fun game.
It was a really fun game. So recommend it.
Nice.
Know thyself.
Wow. What was the best baked good you had?
Best baked good was this insane egg sandwich, which I know technically isn't a baked good, but it was on a homemade sourdough English muffin.
Yum.
Thick, cloud-like, from a place called Ben's Bread. So the bee trend continues.
Right. And I hear Seattle in the summer is like the best time to go.
Seattle in the summer is dreamy to die for. Some people have qualms about it over the winter months. If you're a member of the Seattle community, drop a comment.
Yeah. I didn't see any comments last week, people, about
we have a quiet hold that thoughters.
We've got some wallflowers out there.
What are we calling our
thought daughters.
Thought daughters. Really?
I want it to be thought daughters,
or
but it doesn't have to be.
Or thoughties.
Thinkers. No, that's
no,
so
hot
cunty.
Thought daughters.
Hot. Thought daughters.
Our thought daughters are wallflowers.
Because the trend is like, are you a thought daughter or a... Wait, thought daughter or...
Remind me what thought stands for. Too hot.
Oh, it's not even spelled that way, though. Like, it's a play on THOT.
Oh,
but you taught me that. Thought daughter is a viral internet archetype describing a deeply introspective, intellectual, and empathetic young woman. That is the...
Oh, that's awesome.
And thought daughters can be
sons,
male, female, non-binary, anywhere in between. We embrace all. But I do think you are a thought daughter if you're listening to this.
It's a reclaiming of thought, which is that hoe over there.
That hoe over there. That's right. Yep. It's gay son or thought daughter was the original meme. The gay son or thought daughter meme originated as an offensive rage bait street interview question used to out prejudice. The term thought stands for that hoe over there. Creators on TikTok later subverted the misogynistic premise, redefining thought into thought, THOUGHT, to celebrate introspective, intellectual, and deeply feeling women. I love that.
Nice.
Gay son or thought daughter.
And you only get those 2 options. Sorry.
Yeah, and you're all thought daughters.
Yeah.
I crown thee. Thought daughters, we have some discussing to do about the issue of anger.
We do. And to start this off, we want to recognize that anger is an uncomfortable emotion. Yep. And that's why it's part of this mini-series. We're exploring emotions that we typically find uncomfortable or states of mind that we typically rail against and finding or avoid and finding the benefits. I want to start the episode with, of course, a quote from Freud. We don't have to believe everything he said, but he was a father of a lot of clinical psychology and thought. And he had this quote about anger that I really like. It said, "Depression is anger turned inward." What I really like about this is that it's starting off the episode by honoring the fact that anger and learning how to get comfortable with expressing it is a huge part of being human and a huge part of being a flourishing human.
I love flourishing. Gabor Mate, who I'll get more into, had a quote, "Look at the word depression. What does it mean to depress something? It means to push it down. The repression of healthy anger and sadness and grief undermines your physiology. The good die young because they suppress themselves."
Well, that leads directly to my definition of anger.
Ooh, let's hear it, girl.
So my definition, it's not my definition. It's the definition, as in, if we look at the root of the word anger, it comes from a Latin root.
I'm sorry. Have you seen My Big Fat Greek Wedding?
Yeah.
The root of that word is Greek. Give me any word.
And it is Greek.
And it is Greek.
I love that movie.
I don't think I can probably... Well, I don't know.
Keep your Greek accent in.
Okay.
So the word anger comes from a Latin word, which means to move out or create energy. Wow. It is your body's way of moving through and out to create change.
Whoa.
And that is really interesting that so much of what we started this was the keeping in, the depressing of that emotion can really rot someone.
Yes. And this is the metabolization of it.
And we'll get to what metabolizing anger and listening to it as a signal can really do for you. But it all starts with perception from an evolutionary perspective. Our bodies are perceiving a million things at once, rapidly, every single day. We got into this a little bit when we were talking about our doubt conversation. But if we're thinking about our system one thinking, thinking without thinking, our most basic kind of perception of our environment, we're consciously taking in a million inputs. And our brain is working to keep ourselves safe within those inputs. Anger is a reflex reaction, reflex emotion that actually comes often as an emotion before you even had time to consciously figure out what you're feeling. So it's a visceral emotion. Think about when you touch a hot plate and you automatically move your hand. You've moved your hand because of signals from your body up to your brain rather than top down brain to your body. And 80% of the messaging that our brain takes in every single day is body to brain, not brain to body. Take that in. That's crazy.
80%.
And anger is one of those things. It was built evolutionarily into us as this reaction to our environment, our body signaling that we need to take care of something. We need to take care of our own needs or protect something in our environment, and that something wasn't getting done. Anger was that instinctual alarm bell to make our brain say, okay, something needs to change. So this is why anger works so fast, right? I feel like so often the discourse is anger, because it's such an emotion that comes on quickly, it takes us out of ourselves, or it's our lesser thinking, right? Its job is to work fast in our bodies. It has served us so well. Throughout evolution in that way. But now, of course, we aren't working in forests with tigers.
Right. Back when we worked with tigers.
So this anger can get in the way of emotional connection with people. So while it is a physiological response that is natural, so we need to experience that and take it in, it's about how we metabolize it and work through it so that it doesn't threaten these things that actually matter, which is our social connection.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Can you remind me, why was it beneficial to process your, or like to get into your anger?
It's an alarm bell for your brain that something's wrong and needs to change. It's the survival. It goads us into action. Okay. Really fast. It gets us into our fight or flight.
And that's different than fear. Like, why would you respond angrily to a tiger?
I would say probably to get us into our fight mode. What evolutionary psychologists have really come to understand is that anger is one of the base emotions that get us into action. Way more than sadness, way more than other basic emotions. But it's really baked into us as a signal towards what is wrong and therefore what to do about it.
But isn't it secondary? Like, wouldn't the primary emotion be fear and then the secondary emotion be anger in reaction to that fear?
Not based on what I'm understanding of how it's like a literal body up emotion. It is the first emotion. We have no control over it. What comes afterwards is what we have the actual control over. And maybe the fear isn't like secondary emotion more nuanced?
I guess when I think of those levels of emotion, I think of if you were asking someone like, what's behind that? Like, what's behind that? Anger to me feels like there's something behind it.
You're right. So maybe we just have to say, instead of saying primary emotion, it should be more instinctual emotion, I should be saying.
Instinctual. Okay.
Because you're right. We take in, let's say, a fearful situation. And then anger is, it's not like our brain is then processing that context and then saying, let's get angry. It's instinctual in that it's body up. In terms of by the time we've processed that, we're angry. But it is, to your point, underneath that anger is usually a primary emotion like fear.
Okay.
Like being threatened.
Yeah.
In some other element. Primary emotions being sadness, fear, physical hurt.
Okay. Got it. This is bringing up for me, I alluded to Dr. Gabor Mate. I think it's Gabor Mate. He's a renowned addiction expert. Do you know him?
Mm-mm.
Really?
Mm-mm.
Okay. He wrote this book called When the Body Says No, and he's been on tons of podcasts, and I find him so interesting. He's a renowned addiction expert, speaker, and author known for his expertise on trauma, addiction, stress, and childhood development. He's Hungarian-Canadian, and he survived the Holocaust as an infant in Budapest. His maternal grandparents and most of his extended family were killed in Auschwitz, and his mother entrusted him to a stranger for weeks to save his life. I feel like he is such a compelling, as we've talked about in other episodes, mouthpiece in the sense that he can draw, one, he's a man, and two, he's drawing on this very well-known traumatic event. When he discusses anger and its utility and its danger, it magnifies it, I feel, because of the intensity of his personal experience. And even so, he's such a level-headed, very cerebral person who also just has incredible knowledge on the neuroscience and physiology behind anger.
Another thing that's interesting there is that he's speaking from experience that happened when he was an infant.
Right.
So it's speaking to some real coding of emotion that happens early on in development.
Right. Totally. His central thesis on anger is that anger is not the problem. It's the inability to experience and express healthy anger. Rage and chronic resentment are what happen, he says, when healthy anger has been blocked for too long.
Yes.
The rage system isn't an aberration. It's part of our apparatus. Apparatus being our bodies. He gets into what it does to you when you suppress anger for too long. He says that the role of healthy anger is to protect your boundaries broadly. He talks a lot about the gut-brain connection and how your mind and body cannot be separated. And when you're suppressing healthy anger, you're suppressing your immune system.
And really quickly, just want to say the mind and body can't be separated. And I just mentioned that 80% of the things that your brain is taking in is coming from signals from your body first. Just in terms of like a cranial nerve element, like more nerves go from your body to your brain than your brain to your body. We're operating so often from our body first and then making sense of it. And so there is no two things. We are one being of brain and body.
Because of his personal history, that has given him a vested interest in understanding how does it get stored in the body. He talks a lot about the attachment dynamic between parent and child and how it can be beneficial when you're young to suppress anger, and you learn to do that because it is actually a benefit in that it allowed you to keep your relationship without which you wouldn't be able to survive.
Yes.
So anger, partly due to how we have been socialized, is not condoned. And so expressing anger to a parent threatens that relationship that you're dependent upon.
And no fault to our parents.
No.
We're going to have a really hard time doing it when we're parents too. But I was listening to a conversation with this clinical psychologist, Dr. Becky Kennedy. She's kind of like thought of as this person who's teaching us how to reparent our children and and in doing so ourselves. And she talked a lot about how, of course, when a child is breaking down, having a tantrum, that is really hard. And so we have these things that we do. We put you in timeout. And in doing so, as a child, you make these broad, sweeping understandings of, I get mad. I lose that closeness of my parent figure that I need so much. Anger must be bad.
Right. Totally. A plus B must equal C.
Yes.
We basically are internalizing when we're young that it would be too dangerous and risky to express that emotion, and therefore we suppress it. And as we've talked about so much, and as is really prevalent in the discourse these days in terms of psychology and therapy, it doesn't matter that we now have our higher mind to go to for insight in a situation. If your body and your inner child learned that anger was not acceptable, you're still carrying that unless you're actively reparenting yourself or reteaching that lesson. He says healthy anger is in the moment. It protects your boundaries and then it's gone. It's not necessary anymore. But in adulthood, it no longer becomes a response to the present moment, but it's a response to the past. Instead, he says there's ways of working with it through the body that don't involve either suppressing it or acting it out, but experiencing it, which I think is so interesting. Like, to not suppress your anger when you feel it come up in a moment and not act it out, as he says, not externalize it necessarily in the direction of someone, but to experience it, contains it within your own person, perhaps, but does feel like a flushing of sorts.
It makes me think about the fact that, and I can't remember which episode we talked about this, but emotions as they are last 90 seconds.
Whoa.
Emotions and how they feel in our body as a raw emotion is 90 seconds.
Wow.
And then the brain takes over, right? And then that's when we can get trapped into what Tara Brach, who I mentioned her in our Sage episode as my personal sage. I just love her so much. She has a lot of teaching around anger as a teacher, as information, which we've mentioned a few times now. She says if you don't let yourself take in anger as something that needs to be paid attention to within yourself, but instead get trapped in the rage cycle, you get caught in a very narrow prison of a threatened self. You become a victim, you become angry externally because you haven't taken in and listened to the information and turned inward in order to then perhaps something external does have to change, which we can get into how to think that through, but it becomes this swirl of just this repressed feeling without any of the self-reflection and understanding.
Right. That conjured up this image for me of like, you see men break out in bar brawls. I feel like as I've grown up, I see something like that, a display of aggression. And I'm like, wow.
And every moment of anger up till that point has been buried and not met. This is another Tara Brach, or I guess she's quoting just Buddhist thinkers in general. She says, every emotion is intelligent, and if we can meet it with present, it ends up unfolding instead of getting trapped. If every moment up till then you haven't met the emotion of anger with presence, but have buried it or diverted it to another cause or another emotion, it's stored. And so that moment you're seeing is just the rage built on rage built on rage. It's like anger overload.
Totally. And it's reacting to, as he said, the past. It's not a response to the present.
Right. You're acting not on what just happened, but on all the other reasons you've been angry before.
Yeah. We've all seen, even on Love Island, there have been moments where I'm like, oh, what you're enacting right now is like retribution on someone who is not in this room. This is a deeper stored resentment you have.
There used to be a type of therapy where before there was this deep understanding of just where we are today in clinical psychology, but where you would just go and scream in a room. And they were like, that's great. You're expressing your anger. You would go into this room and you would just release anger, like yell, scream, punch a pillow. That was it. There wasn't a lot of action or understanding that came with it. And that, even though that might be considered experiencing the anger emotion, it didn't help individuals go into the action part of anger, which I think leads us next into why anger exists. What is anger trying to tell us? And what can we do to better use it and listen to it so we don't get trapped in rage or don't get trapped in feelings of powerlessness and don't get possessed by anger so that one thing happens and the rage falls all out that we've been carrying within us.
I love that distinction because you could interpret the whole statistic you shared of 80% of emotions are experienced by the body. Is that experienced by the body first and then the...
Yeah, it's more like 80% of the signals come from our body to brain rather than brain to body.
Yeah, you could hear that and be like, oh, I guess if I go to a rage room and like hit it out, then that will be a catharsis of sorts. And certainly there is some degree of that. As we know, when you're in a low point, moving your body on any level can be helpful. But I do think simply the movement of the body without that being married to either, I guess, analysis or probably more beneficially actual action, it won't be probably very useful.
And because anger isn't just a signal that we have to release energy. It is a signal that we're not getting something we need or that we are in danger. And that what it really wants to go back to the definition from the Latin root, which clearly the Latin people were quite sage about anger, to move out and create something out of it. There needs to be an action created out of it, not retribution. But this is a signal from which you need to do something with it. So talk to me a little bit about what and why anger is thought of as a signal. A signal for what?
Based on my research or gut? Okay.
Well, both.
One thinker who I was looking at, her name is Susan David. She's an author. And I believe also a clinician. She says emotions are data, not directives. Discomfort is the price of admission to a meaningful life, which I love.
Oh, that is so good.
I know. Anger is information, as we've talked about. She says it indicates that something important is being blocked. Anger is motivation.
Yep.
So it indicates that you might need to take action to change some state that you're in. But anger is not instruction, which I love.
Ooh,
she said it doesn't tell you which action is the wisest to take.
Such a good distinction.
So it's like it's the check engine light, but it's not telling you what's wrong with the engine.
Did you just make that up?
Yeah.
Great metaphor.
Well, I was thinking of check engine light when you were saying
The signal, the light.
yeah. It is this bright indicator.
Mm-hmm.
And so it provides data in that sense, but it's not deep data.
And it's your body's instinctual data. But then your brain, your higher self gets to come in and say, okay, let's sit with this and figure out why.
Yeah, your body wouldn't know where to go from there.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at this paper. It's called Anger Has Benefits for Attaining Goals. It was published in the American Psychological Association's Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. And these authors talk about a functional theory of emotion. This kind of is going to draw on the evolutionary biology piece that you were discussing. They say, according to the functional theories, goal discrepancies, this is going to sound flowery and I'll distill it. Goal discrepancies represent adaptive challenges, and emotions are coordinated responses that function to resolve those challenges. So when you encounter an obstacle between yourself and a goal, in the case of anger, your brain generates anger because anger prepares you to overcome resistance to that obstacle. So your brain is like,
the activation energy.
This little bit of anger is going to push you over the hurdle and get you to the side where you're going to achieve the goal. And goal is a loose term here. In the case of fear, your brain serves you up fear, or maybe it's your body, because it's wanting to help you avoid danger. It serves up sadness to help, for example, like recover from a loss, disgust to avoid contamination, which I thought was crazy, and anger, as we said, to push through obstacles. This is a quote from the study. Much like a Swiss Army knife that includes different tools to address different needs, different emotions are best suited to solve specific problems. I like that they distinguish between, it's not as though your anger is the Swiss Army knife. It has to work in tandem with the other emotions for different contexts. In this study, they ran 7 mini studies looking at whether anger improved performance when people face difficult goals. In one of those 7 mini studies, they found that people experiencing anger solved more difficult puzzles than those in neutral emotional states.
Cool.
And they also examined voting behavior during contentious elections and found that anger predicted people actually taking the effort to vote. And therefore increased civic action, which makes total sense.
Makes total sense. And it's such a shame that we have tried to condition certain people out of anger for so long. Because it has been a tool to shut people down. Right? Like if anger is the activation energy that we need to fight societal injustices, to push against when people are encroaching in our own self boundaries or societal boundaries, to not give women or people of color the privilege of being angry. Has been such a tool to silence them. And so it's so great that the conversation's completely changing around anger, I think, in the past few years around how to channel it, both personally and societally.
And I think, I mean, obviously we're not the right people to talk about this, but I want to mention that I hear, at least on TikTok, a fair amount about the rage or anger of Black women. And I didn't pull any for this episode. I should have. But I have seen studies that examine the differential impact and disproportionate impact on Black women holding on to that rage because it isn't socially sanctioned for them to express it. Even, it's been so interesting, multiple seasons in a row of Love Island, you see the social discourse online talk about there is often a discernible difference between how people are commenting on the anger or outbursts of the white women in the show versus the Black women.
People are giving the white women more freedom to be angry.
Or they interpret it in a completely different way. I find myself checking my reactions sometimes. I think the producers can create a pretty convincing storyline, and they are not without bias. And I think they can further biases that we have towards people of color. So it has been nice to listen to, especially this guy Woodland on, have we shown you his videos? He's so freaking funny.
Black?
He's Black, and he is like totally written by a woman. I love his perspective. I think he has, for the most part, he has a few takes that I disagree with, but for the most part, he's touching grass. And I feel like he offers a helpful perspective. And also there are other Black commentators who I think just like shed light on the fact that your gut instinct to this Black woman yelling at her partner on the show might come from a place that's like a little more insidious or needs some examining.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an important element to all of this conversation. So
anger can be beneficial in specific contexts.
Or maybe it's that anger you can't control maybe when you feel it, but how you express it is beneficial or not in certain contexts.
Yeah, the manner in which you express it or experience it.
Yeah.
You bring up an interesting point. Like, I want to say it's only beneficial when but it is, we have to kind of challenge that.
Because I think there's, like, we can't shame this inherent emotion that comes up.
Yeah.
In contexts where it might not be warranted. What we can try to change in ourselves is how we express that or how we metabolize it.
Yeah.
Or how we come to understand it. And then the understanding piece that is this valid in this moment comes second.
Yeah.
But the initial emotion is truly involuntary.
Yeah. Then help me figure out how to say this. I guess it's like it can do something productive in these scenarios.
Yes.
Because sometimes there is unproductive anger.
Definitely.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
Okay. When there's a clear obstacle or injustice, when action is possible, like you have some form of control over the situation. And in the case of the success of the thing you're aiming for requires persistence, confrontation, or effort. Like, insofar as your goal requires persistence, confrontation, or effort, anger will be helpful in spurring you on to do that.
To keep going.
Yeah.
This dovetails a little bit into this therapist, Faith Harper, has done a lot of work on anger. She wrote a book, Unfuck Your Anger, which I think is awesome. She has this acronym, AHEN. Anger equals hurt, expectations, need. Anger comes when you are hurt, when your expectations have not been met, or when a need isn't being met. So I think what you're talking about is like the anger is going to be there.
Yeah.
Then comes what Tara Brach calls the U-turn, which is the inward taking in, why am I feeling this? Is that I am feeling hurt. I have an expectation that hasn't been met, or I'm really sad that something didn't come to be, or is someone else needing too much of me? Yeah. That's that U-turn introspection. And from there, that's when the discernment of, is anger going to be useful now? Is portraying my anger going to be useful? Or was my expectation unrealistic? Like, that's where that higher level thinking has to come in.
Totally.
But having some of these buckets of when it's useful, Tara loves the acronym RAIN, recognizing, accepting, investigating, and nourishing to understand, why am I angry? Then you can actually use it.
Yeah.
And it's that
we
pause.
see so many, I mean, part of the issue is that the examples we see of anger often are people just going, leaving it on your table.
And so we say
versus getting internal and figuring out what provoked that and like what your part in it is.
Yes. And so we think anger is bad. It's not. It's just the reaction, which is so fair. Like, again, our bodies were made to react to anger quickly because it was a survival mechanism.
Right.
And now it's the balancing act of, yes, it's a survival mechanism, and it's all in the context of being a social human being within this social fabric.
Yeah.
And wanting to maintain closeness and loving relationships with others. Let me bring my higher self to this conversation by pausing, enacting the U-turn, understanding what it is, and thinking, is this useful in this moment to express?
Totally.
Easier said than done.
I have some examples of so those 3 buckets I was talking about, examples of those scenarios would be like when you're negotiating for a raise after being treated unfairly, or like organizing politically when you've witnessed an injustice. Anger can provide energy and motivation to act. As you've said, like, anger is not the final step, it's towards action rather than avoiding a problem or just succumbing to it. They actually had, for this psychology paper, they opened the paper with a quote from Malcolm X. Usually when people are sad, they don't do anything. They just cry over their condition. But when they get angry, they bring about a change. And that kind of illustrates the distinction between paralysis or emotional states that encourage withdrawal versus those that would encourage action. Not that sadness can't encourage action, but there could be another step between sadness and what will bring them into action.
Interestingly enough, gets us to the beginning of the episode when we were talking about secondary versus primary emotions and how sadness is a primary emotion, anger is a secondary emotion. Often underneath it is this other emotion, whether it's sadness, fear. It is this interim thing that provokes change.
What I was seeing is that anger can't Anger becomes less useful, I guess is a good way to say it, or even harmful when the problem can't be changed, when careful thinking is more important than immediate action. Like you talked about the reflex thing.
Yeah.
When maintaining relationships is the priority. That's interesting. And when the response is disproportionate to the situation, which actually feels like, hi.
We're recording and we're trying to finish up so then we can go to the game.
Let's do it.
So like...
I can't go. Oh, okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Like snapping at your partner after a long day at work, that manifestation of anger isn't productive.
Yeah.
Nor is getting angry in traffic. Like, yes, maybe in the sense that there's an externalization of what would otherwise bother you in your body. But I do think in clinical terms, that won't be productive in the sense that it's going to change the thing that is unchangeable.
But it might be a sign, right? Like you snap at your partner after a long day. Don't feel overly guilty about it. Like, okay, yeah, you did something very human. If you do the U-turn, maybe it's showing you that you had expectations for the evening that weren't met. And then there's a conversation to be had or just like an opening up of it.
Us just angry at Luis for coming in. I'm like, okay. I was feeling prickly because we had technical difficulties.
Totally. And so the information is super valid. There are obviously then times when you get to say to someone, I got angry with you and it really wasn't about you.
Yeah.
And here's what it was about. Or just apologize because like there doesn't need to be an explanation. You were just in the wrong. Or it was about that person.
Yeah.
But how you went around expressing it wasn't the most productive. But I feel like the signal's always productive. Probably.
Yes, information. I think what Susan David said was it's not an instruction.
Yes.
But it's information and it's motivation.
Yeah. Love it. This leads me to the question I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
I want to get into it with you.
Okay.
And talk about one of our most recent disagreements or when we most recently were angry with each other and the experience for you, the experience for me. And then like ultimately, I think it was really productive. So I think it's a manifestation or example of productive anger.
I love that. Are you thinking of the Lobolita?
Well,
that one?
That one could be one. But I was also thinking of like the time we were both angry about the pod and crying at each other.
Yes. I
think that one might be more productive.
Yeah.
Well, they're both productive, but one might be more. Well, which one's more fun for people?
Well, I'm trying to think of like, we weren't really, I mean, there was literally a fleeting moment of anger perhaps, or like frustration.
Which one are you talking about?
Kind of in both, but I think it was more prolonged in the Lobolita one. Yeah. Because because of what had built. Like, I think that's almost more, like, I really wasn't angry when we were having our like disagreement about the pod stuff.
Yeah.
That's not the emotion
I guess that's true.
Chosen. There have been a few growing moments for us recently.
Good moments though.
Great growing moments. Yeah, great. To give you a sense of the scene, we were at a bar with a few friends and the conversation came up. You hear it on TikTok a lot these days. If you were confronted in the woods, I think it started on Reddit. Would you prefer to be confronted in the woods as a woman on your own with a bear or a man? And the fact that it's even a question has become discussed a lot online because the implication implicit in the question is that men are scary and unpredictable like a wild animal. And so the idea that you could compare the two as valid options for which to be confronted with is the crux of the question, the like philosophical question. And so we got to discussing this and different perspectives were thrown out. And
well, you and I interpreted the question differently and answered differently. And have a different perspective on my own answer. And you say automatically bear. And I have a different answer to it depending on the context. And so I think you and I got thrown into this disagreement because we suddenly felt like we had to be entrenched in our own side almost.
Yeah. Like we were representative of the two opinions.
And this way broader systematic thing.
Yeah.
And in the anger, which felt so uncomfortable. Like I literally felt like I was having
I wanted to be able to like tap out like in a wrestling match.
Yeah.
Like
I literally felt like I was watching ourselves from above, which is like, and it was temporary, that emotion. Like the worst that I think I can tap into and be like, oh yeah, it probably was only 90 seconds of that feeling. But in that moment, it quickly, our anger hardened our arguments.
Yes.
We had to get further away from each other, which is such like a microcosm of our entire political situation right now, because our anger suddenly made us feel more defensive.
Yeah.
Because we were feeling, I think, hurt in being misunderstood by each other.
Yes. Yeah, it's so interesting how that resulted in,
from.
like you said, like hardening or digging in a little more. And as you later said, we called that night before bed to, get our hearts on the right page. And you said, like, I knew that this had escalated because you were saying things that I know you don't.
Yeah.
You were being so hardcore that you were saying things that I just know that you don't believe and that don't sound like you. And I felt the same way about you. And I was like, that's so true. I got to this phase of being, we both got backed into corners, it felt like, because of the escalation of the thing in the middle.
Right.
That we felt that we had to be staunch.
Yes. Yeah. And then I think it was interesting is like, because I think you and I experience anger as this unpleasant emotion that was telling a signal that we had both felt misunderstood and didn't recognize each other and therefore were hurt by each other in that moment. We immediately, literally 30 minutes later, once we got home, called each other. And we had this brief text experience where I was like, do you want to go to bed and like talk about it tomorrow, or do you want to talk about it now? And you're like, I'd rather go to bed. But if you want to talk about it now, we can talk about it now. And I was like, okay.
I just felt like, I feel like I could feel you. I didn't want you to hold tension while you slept.
Yeah.
Or like,
And then immediately we got on the phone because I was like, yeah, you're right. I want to talk about it now, which was good because you didn't have to say that.
Which is, I said, I think it might be nice to like chat tomorrow and recalibrate. And you were like, great, sounds good. And 5 minutes later you go, recalibrate sounds like a scary word. I was like, oh God.
Yeah, let's talk. What? Yeah. And then we talked and it was so good because it just took like, I think having the space between the moment and then the talking was also good because we could get down to the bottom of why we were angry.
Yeah.
Ultimately, every time we get angry, and I have experienced this with most of my relationships with people in my life that I love, every time I get angry with them and then get through it, is incredibly sustaining to the relationship.
Yeah.
It's very rare that I feel like a moment of anger, once it's been worked through, sure, I feel guilt. Sure, I feel like I wish I hadn't acted that way.
Yeah.
But then when I think about the anger behind the moment and what was communicated through it, it's incredibly rewarding.
Productive, totally. That and the other example we were considering talking about both ended in tears.
Yeah.
Like not ended. The middle was tears.
Yeah.
Which to me indicates that whole secondary primary thing where it's like there was aching beneath, there was something more tender beneath the anger, like that feels so inflammatory. And so I think in the same sense, I keep checking myself so that I'm not unintentionally saying that anger's bad.
Yeah.
But I guess I mean anger in this moment, it's another example of anger being an indicator that there's something else there that is perhaps even softer. This was one of the most effective moves. I want to keep it in my back pocket. We had kind of just gone over the hump of talking it through and resolving it. And you sent a screenshot from the argument we had a few weeks prior on FaceTime that ended up in tears. And it was a screenshot of us both crying. And you sending that in the moment of this fight. Oh my God, what a relief.
Yeah.
Like, it's so nice to be able to zoom out and be like, yeah, we're trying our hardest to communicate and disagree, find common ground.
Yeah.
And love each other.
And all of this is in the name of not being afraid of anger, learning how to use the anger and listen to it. And I think we both did that in that example where we like figured out what was underneath it and then moved through it.
When you were talking about the reflex of anger, like touching a hot stove, that to me maps onto the experience that we had where I said something in the argument where you were like, that I don't agree with that. And that's not how you feel either.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the same feeling of like, ooh, what?
Yeah.
Like, who are you right now?
Yeah.
And then like, we both had moments of that, and that's the spark of anger that triggers the cascade of the other stuff.
Yeah.
So it was in some sense a catalyst in that argument, and it was also a catalyst for greater understanding and connection.
Yeah. Well, what you just said about like the hot plate made me think one is always going to feel anger. Like, even if you're pushing it down, even if you're trying to act with a lot of rationality, the hot plate moment's there.
Yeah.
And then in arguments, when you're angry, you might say things, but every time you realize it's a hot plate moment, you give yourself a little bit more recognition to realize it's the hot plate, pause and say, do I actually want to say this? Or do I actually want to do this? But thinking the anger is bad is detrimental, and then thinking the anger is the instruction is also.
Yes.
So it's both being okay with it as an emotion and not thinking it's the instruction.
Yeah.
And that's such a fine balancing act. that's like
So
an
true.
ongoing human lesson.
I think it's so rare for people to feel that they can, what's it called? Like
Walk back.
walk back. Yeah. In that moment, we both knew we would eventually later that night or the next day walk back some of that stuff or like, you know, clarify. But in the moment, feeling like you've dug your heels in, it feels impossible to lift them up and like walk back. And I think so much of what we see in our discourse today is like stubbornness and ego and pride all mixed up with the anger that makes it really challenging, especially if you haven't seen good models of it, to know how, not that it has to happen in that moment, although it would be nice because it could prevent greater harm. But like, I would like to be able to, in that moment, say, hold up, I just got a whatever 4,000 foot view and I am not communicating like myself. But I think the hormones that are coursing through us in that time, like the cortisol, like whatever that is, adrenaline, it's really hard to do that. And I think the best we can wish for is to be able to come back around, like you talked about the U-turn and the U-turn with other people. And be like I did need a beat to settle. And people say when you're drunk, like, are drunk thoughts true thoughts or whatever? Or some people are like, I didn't mean what I said. And I think there is nuance there. Sometimes when you're angry, you do say things that you really don't mean because of that heightened physiological arousal. Same with when you're drunk. I think it like messes up all the wiring. Sometimes you're a little more honest, but
yeah. And it makes me, what you just said about like the heightened, to use this word in like more of like an imagery standpoint, like the heightened hormones of anger rushing through you. I think about all the secondary emotions that we layer on top of anger, like shame, like guilt that have been conditioned into us, fear of the anger, that almost mean that one would have to dig their heels in more, because instead of being like, this is just an angry thought and I can now walk myself back, it's like, well, it's shameful to be angry, so I have to be really right to make it worth it. So I think the deconditioning of anger as bad, of anger as something to be shameful of or guilty, or as angry outbursts as something that you can't apologize for because it was so guilty you can't even look at it, is such a healing journey to even be able to walk it back in the moment even better. Or afterwards.
We might cut this, but one of my earliest memories is I was like sitting at the kitchen counter and my mom, I think I had asked for something or like asked for a play date and she had said no. And she leaned over into the fridge. I can remember it vividly. She opens the fridge door. I'm over here. She opens the fridge door, leans over, and I think mommy has a big butt in my head. And I knew that that was something that she like didn't like about herself. I wasn't old enough to know why, but I just knew she didn't because she talked about it. And it felt like months in kid time, like maybe it was days. It felt like months that I couldn't sleep, like because could not fall asleep. I felt so guilty.
But you hadn't even said it.
No.
You just had thought
Well, that's OCD. That's my OCD. I couldn't stop ruminating over how bad of a thought that was and how like I had that shameful thought in a moment of anger. And I went downstairs finally one night after what I thought was months, maybe it was days, I don't know. And my dad was sitting reading in the living room and I was like, Daddy, I have to tell you something. And he put me on his lap and I was like, I had this thought about mommy. I thought she had a big butt and I was mad at it. And I like, when you're a kid, you just don't know that you have thoughts that you either don't mean or that are, you know, passing and don't have to define you as a person.
Wow.
And I think what he said to me was, that's okay, honey. Sometimes we have thoughts that we don't mean.
That's a great story.
Sometimes we think things that we don't mean. And it like relief washed over me and I was able to forgive myself and I could sleep. But it's so sad to think of like, that's such a micro version of what happens to people in macro ways. People's lives can be defined by the shame that follows anger.
Yeah. So good.
And what a lovely gift to have someone who can help you release that. And also like we can do that for ourselves.
Yeah. Mic drop.
Sorry, Mom, your butt's small. But
we have to keep that in. That is so good. Can you ask her if we can keep it in? You just did that so well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sure she'll feel fine about it.
That was
you
so
have the perfect
good.
butt, Mom.
Well, I love you.
I love you. This was so good.
This was amazing. Bye. Thank you, Phoebe Fry, for this episode's music.
And thank you, Emily Kiernan, for the beautiful cover art.
If you like this episode, please like, share, and leave a comment. And we'll see you next week.